legal team slams what it calls a frivolous and dangerous impeachment charade. They're demanding a speedy acquittal at the Senate trial, which starts in under 24 hours. Our top story this morning, the first case of a mysterious SARS-like virus that emerged in China last month has been confirmed here in South Korea. People in South Korea who may have come in contact with the patient are being closely monitored. And as I mentioned in the headlines, that patient is isolated at hospital. Now, this all comes as Chinese authorities have confirmed over 200 cases so far in their country alone. Our Kim Hyo-sun starts us off.
South Korea confirmed on Monday the first local case of a new pneumonia virus that has rapidly spread across China. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said a 35-year-old Chinese woman who flew in from Wuhan had a fever, respiratory problems, as well as other symptoms when she arrived at Incheon International Airport on Sunday. She was quarantined and tested positive for the virus.
The confirmed patient was identified in the quarantine phase and there is no community exposure. Those that have come in contact, including passengers and aircraft crew, are currently being investigated.
The new SARS-like virus that originated in central China is now spreading across the country, with over 200 cases confirmed by the Chinese authorities. It has also confirmed that the new strain of the coronavirus can pass from person to person. Infections have been reported in Beijing, Shanghai, and the southern province of Guangdong. As the country prepares for the Lunar New Year holidays, during which hundreds of millions of Chinese travel across the nation, President Xi Jinping insisted the virus must be, quote, resolutely contained. Against such a backdrop, the World Health Organization explained that it plans to convene an emergency meeting in Geneva on Wednesday to address the outbreak. It's expected to decide whether the outbreak should be classified as a state of international emergency. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the South Korean government has called for all possible measures to contain the spread of the new pneumonia virus. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has raised the country's infectious disease alert level by 1 notch from the lowest blue to yellow. That means watch. The government has ordered a quick and thorough probe of the patient and transparent disclosure of all relevant information to the public. It will also increase quarantine inspections on planes arriving from Wuhan and expand cooperation with China. Experts have pointed to the possibility of additional cases here, with millions of people expected to travel during the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday. The agency strongly advises people who visited China and show symptoms to get checked at nearby hospitals. In other news, the head of search and rescue operations in Nepal says his team has pinpointed 2 possible spots where 4 South Korean trekkers and 3 Nepalese nationals might have been when they went missing late last week. The official said Monday that the team has detected signals from the equipment that was being carried by the missing. He added there's a chance they could still be alive, but warned that it's going to take at least 2 weeks, perhaps even months, for the snow to melt. The missing South Koreans were part of a teachers' volunteer group working with children in Nepal. They were en route to a Himalayan mountain when an avalanche struck last Friday. The International Monetary Fund says it's now less optimistic about global growth prospects, warning that the outlook remains sluggish. It also said there's no clear signs of a turnaround anytime soon. Lee Seung-jae reports.
In October last year, the International Monetary Fund projected a global growth rate of 3.4% for 2020. However, in a revised forecast Monday, the IMF downgraded its outlook to 3.3%, citing lower growth in India. The Washington-based institution also revised down its growth rate for 2019 from 3% to 2.9%.
We are projecting a modest recovery in growth, for growth to increase from 2.9% in 2019 to 3.3% in 2020 and 3.4% in 2021. The slight downward revision of 0.1% for both 2019 and 2020 and of 0.2% for 2021 is owed largely to downward revisions for India.
According to the IMF, the world economy is on pace to grow at the slowest pace since the global financial crisis more than a decade ago. Despite its forecast for 3.4% growth in 2021, that estimate was also cut by 0.2 percentage point from October. Despite signs of some stabilization, the IMF says the global economy has not yet reached a turning point.
After a synchronized slowdown in 2019, we expect a moderate pickup in global growth this year and next. We already see some tentative signs of stabilization. Recent data suggest that trade and industrial output are bottoming out, but we have not reached a turning point yet.
The IMF also remains cautious about the state of the global economy going forward, especially when it comes to further trade tensions. It says new uncertainties could emerge between the U.S. and the EU, while it cautions that the Washington-Beijing trade spat could flare up again in the future. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that, a survey by the IMF is usually published twice a year, April and October, where it presents global economic developments as well as growth outlooks for individual economies, and that includes South Korea, of course. Revisions for the world's major economies are issued in January and July, but no revision for South Korea's outlook was made in the January publication. Now, South Korea's producer prices edged up in December from the month before, mainly due to higher agricultural goods prices. The Bank of Korea says its producer price index came to 103.71 in December, up 0.3% on month. The central bank said agricultural goods prices rose because of a decrease in supply. Electricity, gas and water prices also crept up, contributing to an uptick in producer prices. On year, South Korea's overall producer prices in December rose 0.7%. South Korea's cabinet will vote this morning on plans to try and co-host the 2032 Summer Olympics with North Korea when they meet. In the meeting chaired by President Moon Jae-in, the cabinet will review ways to successfully co-host the Olympics and finalize plans for the project. The two Koreas in February of last year sent a joint bid for the Games to the IOC, and President Moon Jae-in late last year reaffirmed Seoul's resolve to host the event with the North. South Korea had previously invited North Korean athletes and officials to the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics here in South Korea in 2018, with the two delegations even marching together under one flag. Now, do you fancy a trip to one of the world's most reclusive regimes? Now, it's fair to say that it's definitely not for everyone, but the South Korean government is looking for ways to reintroduce individual tours to North Korea. The move is in line with President Moon's strong desire to resume cross-border cooperation. Finally, we got some more specifics on Monday as officials unveiled a number of possible scenarios on how this plan can actually work. Oh Jung-hee reports.
The past week has seen question marks over how South Korea might go ahead with allowing individual civilian trips to North Korea. And on Monday, the government finally opened up about some ideas. Seoul's Unification Ministry said the so-called individual trips would be for civilians who receive a legitimate invitation from North Korea via a non-profit organization or travel agency in a third country. An invitation from the North could be confirmed through a visa, it said, if the regime decides to issue visas for South Koreans. And tourist safety will also have to be guaranteed through an official document. There are three specific types of individual trips that the government deems possible. 1. Families separated by the Korean War visiting North Korea's Kaesong and Mount Kumgang. 2. South Koreans visiting Pyongyang and other resort areas like Wonsan, Galma, and Samjian. And 3. Letting foreign tourists visit the north as well when they come to South Korea. The South Korean government has not officially shared its ideas with the North yet and says it's reviewing how it should bring up the matter. The Unification Ministry stresses that there's no reason private trips should be impossible, noting that the North is already visited by many tourists from China, Europe, and the U.S. The ministry explains that tours do not violate the international sanctions or the U.S. sanctions and are not subject to U.S. secondary boycotts either. Seoul is hopeful that if private trips do become a reality, then they'll make room for inter-Korean relations to lead the denuclearization talks forward. But for this to happen, security issues will have to be clearly resolved. South Korean tours through North Mount Kumgang were suspended in 2008 after a South Korean tourist was shot dead by a North Korean soldier. 오정희, Arirang News.
Now, Japan's Prime Minister, Mr. Shinzo Abe, is suddenly being a touch more friendly towards South Korea than he normally is. In a policy speech on Monday, he called for future-looking ties. However, it should be noted that he hinted that Japan won't be budging on disputes over history. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
In his policy speech Monday to the National Diet, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe referred to South Korea as his country's most important neighbor.
Essentially, South Korea is the most important neighbor with which Japan shares basic values and strategic interests.
That's in contrast to his policy speech in January last year, which left out any mention of Tokyo's ties with Seoul, only to say that Japan will work with the U.S., South Korea, and the international community on North Korea. There have since been efforts to build bridges, such as Seoul's decision to conditionally maintain their joint military intel sharing pact, while Japan partially eases export restrictions on South Korea. The leaders of the two countries also held a summit last December, where they agreed on the need for bilateral talks and not leave their disputes unaddressed. But during Monday's speech, Abe also made clear that Tokyo won't go easy in its long-running row with Seoul over compensation for wartime forced labor. Japan claims that matters of reparation were settled by a 1965 treaty that normalized ties between the two.
I sincerely hope South Korea keeps the promises made between the two countries and works towards building future-oriented relations.
Some experts say despite the divide over history, the change in tone creates at least a chance for progress.
Prime Minister Abe has not used the term strategic interest since 2016, so we can say the mood has definitely improved and that he's trying to foster corporate ties again. But there's still no solution to their bilateral dispute over history. With neither Seoul nor Tokyo willing to compromise, they're walking on thin ice. But there's no doubt this change in tone indicates that they'll be able to take things in a future-oriented direction.
On North Korea, the Japanese leader said he wants to work toward normalization of bilateral ties by settling their unfortunate past.
Based on the Japan-Korea-Pyongyang Declaration, we will resolve various issues with North Korea, settle the unfortunate past, and aim for the normalization of diplomatic relations.
He reiterated his determination to deal with North Korea's kidnapping of Japanese nationals decades ago still unresolved, and to sit down with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un without any preconditions. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Japan is opening an expanded exhibition to the public today, once again asserting its false territorial claims to South Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo. Located in Tokyo, Japan's National Museum of Territory and Sovereignty has a Dokdo section that reportedly says Korea illegally occupied Dokdo by force in 1953. However, Dokdo has been under the control of the Korean government since its independence from Japanese colonial rule in 1945. Japan's foreign minister said in a parliamentary speech on Monday that Dokdo is inherently Japan's territory. Seoul's foreign ministry strongly protested the minister's improper claim to Dokdo and urged Japan to immediately shut down the Dokdo exhibition. Now get ready for a big week in American politics. The White House has filed a long 100-page plus legal brief to fire back at the 2 impeachment articles against President Trump as his Senate trial is due to start within the next 24 hours. It also calls for a speedy acquittal of the president. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Yoon Jung-min. Jung-min, fill us in on the latest.
Sure, Mark. President Trump's legal team argues that the impeachment articles passed by the House were, quote, constitutionally defective and should be quickly dropped by the Senate. This is according to a 110-page long legal brief filed by the White House on Monday ahead of the Senate trial. The executive summary says the Senate should speedily reject the articles and acquit President Trump. The lawyers argue the first article, abuse of power, does not state an impeachable offense under the Constitution. President Trump has been accused of allegedly pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political rivals. The lawyers argue the second article, obstruction of Congress, also fails to constitute an impeachable act, as the president was only asserting his legal rights and privileges of the executive branch against, quote, defective subpoenas. President Trump has been additionally accused of allegedly blocking witnesses from testifying and withholding evidence. Trump's lawyers also say the Democrats have degraded the impeachment process and damaged the separation of powers. In response, House Democrats submitted a 9-page filing saying President Trump believes he's above the law. The Democrats again claimed President Trump did violate the law and risked U.S. national interests. The Senate trial will begin on Tuesday local time. It remains to be seen whether the Senate will summon witnesses to give testimony. Moodys has downgraded Hong Kong's rating, saying it lacks the ability to settle the political or economic turmoil in the city. On Monday, the ratings agency lowered Hong Kong's rating to AA3 from AA2. It also changed the outlook to stable from negative. For months, the city has been rocked by clashes between police and protesters calling for greater democracy. Hong Kong's economy sharply contracted in the third quarter of last year, due mainly to a plunge in the number of tourists, which in turn hit businesses and consumption. In September of last year, Fitch Ratings downgraded Hong Kong to AA from AA+. The International Labour Organization forecasts the total number of unemployed people in the world will increase slightly this year compared to the year before. In an annual report published Monday, the organization estimates there will be about 190 million people unemployed globally, up 2 million compared to last year. Last year's global unemployment rate of 5.4% is expected to remain the same 2020 and tick up to 5.5% in 2021. Although unemployment rate has been stabilizing for the past 9 years, the report explained that not enough jobs are being created for those who wish to enter the labor market.
Now, all the statistics show that the world's population is aging. The number of elderly people is expected to double by the year 2050, when it's projected to reach nearly 2.1 billion. So to keep the elderly company and hopefully keep them mentally stimulated, small and you could say quite endearing social robots are being trained by artificial intelligence. Here's Oh Se-young with part 2 of our special series on AI.
If you can't remember where you left your keys, a robot powered by artificial intelligence could tell you where they are or even bring them to you. That's what Brown University's Human-to-Robot Lab is aiming to develop, training a small robot called Curry to identify different objects and remember which ones are important.
It's trying to extract contextual information, but because as you see, when a human is actually walking around in a surrounding, it does not remember everything.
Idris is coding algorithms to create long-term memory for mobile robots, which are for now only capable of observing and working with their current surroundings.
if you want to make robots, mobile robots like Curry, more intelligent, you need to look at the past observations as well. And that's why this long-term memory comes. And this has various applications. It can be used either in improving health monitoring of the elderly, it can be used as a personal assistant robot, or it can even be used in surveillance.
The technology is expected to be used in robots designed to assist the elderly. Those range from cute companion robots to functional ones that help prevent dementia. This Korean tech firm at the Consumer Electronics Show this month brought the two attributes together with its robot Bommy. Bommy interacts with its owner and uses big data to provide customized cognitive training through games and activities, such as remembering shopping lists to help prevent dementia. The robot also reminds users to exercise and take their medicine at the right time. Bommy is currently being tested by patients at various hospitals in Seoul. As AI technology evolves, experts hope assistive robots will enable doctors to better diagnose and check up on elderly patients.
We hope to improve the robot's features to actually detect and identify emergency situations or abnormalities and alert medical authorities immediately.
Nearly 1 in 4 people in the world will be aged 60 or older by 2050, double the number we see today. The demographic trend is set to fuel demand for AI in elderly care, a market that's expected to exceed $5.5 billion by 2022. Woo-seong, Arirang News, Providence.
Good morning. Most regions had a brief cold snap to start the day this morning, but temperatures will rise fast and tomorrow will be milder than today. Sunshine will be joined by clouds as the day goes on, and daily highs will range between 4 and 10 degrees Celsius under distant air today. Now, the Lunar New Year holiday is only a few days away, and those of you planning to hit the roads should be aware that traffic accidents frequently happen on the day before the Seollal holiday, especially after 6 p.m. as many people travel right after work. And you know, a lot of these accidents happen because of drivers ignoring traffic lights. Also this year, we have wintry precipitation in store nationwide on Thursday, the day before the holiday. And those heading to Gangwon-do province will need to drive with extra care, as Gangwon-do will see frequent showers all through the holidays. Meanwhile, it's shaping up to be a mild Lunar New Year holiday this year. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for views around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. A lot more coming up, including our next newscast. That's happening at noon, Korea time, in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.